Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 4 of Ramble Reviews. I feel like it's been a little bit of a minute. I feel like I get to release these episodes like once a month, which generally speaking, one book a month while doing a full course load in college, I'm gonna say it's pretty good. Typically when I read like in the summer or something, I finish a book maybe in like 3-4 days, sometimes less. I finished a book in like a day. But I feel like one book a month is pretty good. At the end of last episode, I did talk about reviewing a mystery that I read. And I was going to review it. It was The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Awesome book. I think I gave that 5 stars on Goodreads. That was awesome. I'm usually a little nervous about reading mysteries because I think a lot of them are very similar and they're very kind of cliche and you know what's going to happen before you get to the end of the book. Like by the middle you can tell what's going to happen, and a lot of the times they follow like the same trajectory. So I haven't read a mystery in a long time. I did read The Breakdown by B.A. Paris in the summer. That was really good. But even towards like the middle, I kind of knew what was going to happen and I was on the right track. The Housemaid though, great book, would highly recommend it. Very excited for the movie, very excited to see how they tell the story, and I think the cast for that is also gonna be really good. So I was going to review that one, but after I read that one, I got this book, which is my book that I'm going to review this week, which is Atonement by Ian McEwan. I was given this book, shout out Pete. He gave me this book, and I'm not usually, and this sounds bad because I feel like I should be this way, but I'm not a huge classic reader, and I want to get more into that. I want to get more into classics. I really want to read like Fahrenheit 451 and like The Handmaid's Tale and all those classics. So I want to get more into them. So when this book was given to me, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read it, because I usually wouldn't pick up a classic for myself. And I feel like, knowing me, if I read like the blurb of this in like Barnes & Noble, I don't think I would want to read it. Knowing me, I'd probably pick up the first couple pages and read it and be like, I could do without it. But anyway, so I did read this, and I'll be super honest, I did give this 3.5 stars on Goodreads, not for the pure fact that I didn't like it. I actually really liked this book. I loved it, and I loved the way it ended, because like I had to do some like deep diving on the internet to like read further about it. But one of the comments that I read on Goodreads before I started reading this book was that people were like, this is one of the slowest starts in a book you'll probably ever read. And I was like, people always say that. They just don't like classics. Like, I'm one of them. I get it. No, this book genuinely was the slowest beginning I've ever read in a book, ever. Like, probably the first, like, 100, 200 pages were so slow. This book is broken down into 4 parts. So you have part 1, part 2, part 3, and then you have part 4, which is called London 1999. All the other parts are part 1, part 2, part 3. Part 1 and 2, I really struggled with, because part 1 and part 2 dealt a lot with detail and like scene setting and imagery, and that's all important, and that's all fine and well to make a good story, and you need that. But I think the description in this probably could have been cut in half, and the book would have been just as good, and you would have gotten the point that Ian McEwan wanted you to get. So I'll explain a little bit more about why the scene setting was a little too much for me. And then in part 2, I'll fast forward a little bit. This book deals very heavily in part 2 about war, and about like, I think it was World War II. Don't quote me on that. I think it was World War II. I should know that, but I don't. I'm not a huge fan of books that talk about war. I don't know why. I just tend to find it like kind of boring. because when you talk about war, you're really getting into some description, and like authors love to like paint the picture for you, but they love to do that in like 100+ pages. And I just don't have like the patience for it. So I tend to like veer away from books that had to do with war. I didn't know this one had war in it because I didn't pick it up myself. So when I got there, I was like, oh, okay. But anyway, so this book follows this girl named Bryony Tallis. She's the main character. And it follows her sister Cecilia, their family, and this boy named Robbie. And Robbie is the son of a worker for the Tallis family. So the Tallis family is a pretty wealthy English family, and they've got people that like work for them. And so Robbie is the son of, I'm pretty sure his mom and dad both worked for the family. And he goes to Cambridge, and Bryony's older sister Cecilia also goes there. And this is in the summer of, I believe it was in the 1930s. And they're home for the summer from college and everything. And so at this point, Bryony is about 11. And they have a very interesting family dynamic. Their dad, he's not really ever in the book. He's kind of off at work. So I think he's like the top dog in the house, if you will. He's always away. And their mom suffers from these really intense, really bad migraines. So she's pretty much always in bed, doesn't really do much of going around or talking or socializing because she just like kind of can't handle it. And her mom, you find out, also struggles with the fact that Bryony was like her last baby, and she can see Bryony getting older and becoming more independent and needing her less. And I think she struggles with the fact that she doesn't have like that child's love that she's so used to, and that she doesn't have someone that's so dependent on her anymore. And so she kind of struggles with like her inability to be present, but also like the fact that she's not necessarily needed in the mom sense that she was used to. And during that summer, Bryony and Cecilia's cousins, Lola and her two twin brothers, the one brother has a name that I'm gonna butcher, so I'm gonna like move past that. I pronounced it as like Piero. I don't even know if that's right. I think it was like Piero and like Jackson. They were minor characters. But they come to live with the Tallis family in the summer because their parents are going through a divorce. And during that time, divorce was very frowned upon. And their mom was kind of off in a different country, I think like maybe France or something. She was off in a different country, I think seeing somebody, and the whole thing was very frowned upon. So the three siblings, Lola and her two younger brothers, were struggling with that. Because the Tallis family is very regimented, they're very strict. They do meals and certain things at certain times, has to be a certain way. So they were adding to the mix of chaos there. And so the book basically, after you get through like the description of everybody's like story, like Robbie, for instance, he's coming back from Cambridge, he wants to be a doctor. He's also gotten a lot of financial help from the Tallis family as like a repayment because his dad left him and his mom. So his mom's a single parent. His dad left. So the Tallis family, and Mr. Tallis, especially the dad, have been very influential to him and helping him get to medical school. So yeah, after you get through part one of all those descriptions, the end of part one where you're like, oh, it's finally getting juicy. Like finally you get to like 100 pages and you're like, oh my God. So basically, Bryony is seen as this very imaginative girl. She's always writing, always has her nose in a book. She's always making plays. Her way of like disconnecting from the world is through writing. And so she makes this play to present because Cecilia and Bryony's older brother, Leon, is coming home to visit for the summer. And she makes this whole play that involves all of the cousins and is going to present it to him and his friends when he comes to visit for the summer. just with all the chaos of the house, it's the hottest summer they've had, and with all the chaos of like the cousins and everything, the play winds up not working out, and it really throws Bryony into this mess of being upset and like of things not working out the way she wanted them to, and she becomes really distraught and really disappointed. And you pretty much see her towards the end of part 1, like moping around that no one wants to indulge her in her like fictional fantasies. And then you switch to focusing on Robbie. And Robbie and Cecilia have always been friends. They grew up together, they go to college together, but they run in different circles. So they're not really around each other that much. And so you see Robbie start to develop this crush on Cecilia, and you see her like mirror it back. Because as you can see from Bryony's perspective, she sees them one day outside. Cecilia is carrying a vase that she's going to the well to fill up with water to put flowers in, and her and Robbie wind up having this like little flirtatious confrontation. They drop the vase, it cracks into the well, and Cecilia goes into the well and like gets her dress all wet and whatever. And it was a very, I think, intimate moment between the two of them, because they really hadn't moved past like a platonic friendship ever. And so Bryony sees this, and she sees all this happening, and she's kind of like, like, that's a little weird. Like, I've never really seen them interact like that. And then so they part ways, and there's dinner at the Tallis family at home that night. So Robbie goes back to his house, and you kind of get into like the inner workings of his mind. You see his crush for Cecilia develop, and he winds up deciding to write her a note, like confessing his feelings to her. He writes 2 notes. The first note he writes, it's a little like descriptive. I don't want to say vulgar. It's not vulgar. It's just it's a little bit more like PG-13, I guess you could say. And he writes that, and he's like, yeah, no, I gotta scrap that. Like, she can't read that. And then he writes her more of a heartfelt one that seems more normal to give somebody. And he's in such a rush to get ready for this dinner that he just picks up the letter and he stuffs it in an envelope, and he walks to the Tallis family house. And he sees Bryony out front, and he asks Bryony to give the letter to Cecilia because he's too nervous to give it to her and have her read like his feelings like in front of him. And as Bryony's turning around, ready to go give the letter to Cecilia, she walks into the house, and Robbie realizes, he's like, oh my God, I put the wrong letter in the envelope. I put the one that was more descriptive in the envelope. And Bryony is very like, you come to see, she's a little bit of like an infuriating character, because she's kind of nosy and she's kind of whiny, and she basically rips open the letter and reads it before giving it to Cecilia. And she reads it, and it talks about things that are a little more advanced for her age, and she is like mind blown. She's like, I can't believe someone would write this about my sister. I can't believe someone like Robbie, who I've been with my whole life, who's been our best friend, who's taught me how to swim, like, can't believe he would say things like this. And she thought it was so vulgar, and she thought after reading that letter, she needed to protect Cecilia. Like, she needed to be like her guard, to be like, this Robbie kid's like messed up. Like, why would he say things like that? Like, I need to block her from his like destruction or destructive nature or whatever. And so then they're getting ready for dinner, and Robbie and Cecilia meet in the house, and they basically, do the thing if you get what I'm saying, in the library, and Bryony walks in on them. And from her perspective, she thinks that Cecilia is being attacked, and not that she walked in on them having like an intimate moment. And so she thinks that Robbie is assaulting Cecilia. So she throws this like huge fit. They go to dinner. Everything's very awkward. No one will really talk. Everyone knows something's like going on. And so The twins, as they're having a hard time adjusting to the summer with the Tallis family, they ask to be excused from dinner, and the family comes to find out in a couple minutes that the boys ran away. So it becomes an all-out effort for the entire Tallis family to go out onto their property to find the twins. And everyone disperses in a different way to find them. And you come to find out, after they find the twins, it takes them all night. They get Mr. Tallis involved, they get the police involved. After they find the twins, you find out that Robbie found them, and he's carrying them on his shoulders back to the house. And you find that out, but you don't find that out until a little bit after, when Bryony is down on the property looking for the twins. She finds Lola, and she finds Lola like crumpled on the ground, crying, and she sees someone on top of Lola. And automatically, because of her perceptions on Robbie that she had just made that night, she thinks the person on top of Lola is Robbie. So when the person on top of Lola hears Bryony come down to like save Lola, he scurries off. Well, Bryony automatically assumes it was Robbie who assaulted Lola. It was dark, it was night, like pitch black, no one could see anything. Lola, so Bryony automatically assumes it's Robbie that assaulted Lola, and she was like, I know it's him because I saw him assault Cecilia in the library. I read the note he gave her, like, he's a bad man, he means no good business, like, we gotta get him out of here. And Lola is very embarrassed that had happened to her. And it's a hard thing to put into words, but she's ashamed that happened to her, and she can't really voice who it was because she doesn't really know, because it was dark, she couldn't see. She doesn't really know who it was. So she kind of takes Bryony's words at face value and is like, oh, like, yeah, Robbie. Like, if you think it was Robbie and you know it was Robbie, I agree with you, it was Robbie. And they go with that story. And as the police are at the house, because the twins were missing, Bryony pretty much fabricates this story that Robbie was the one who attacked and assaulted Lola and Cecilia. And the whole family, no one gives Robbie a chance to speak, no one gives him a chance to make his case. And mind you, also, when Leon came to visit, he brought friends, and one of his friends was Paul Marshall. He's important, remember him later. So no one took Robbie's side, no one gave him a moment to speak. They were all just like, yeah, Bryony's story, like, it's Robbie. And they took Robbie away in handcuffs that night and took him to jail. And Cecilia was like, come back for me. I'll wait for you. I know it wasn't you. I believe you. I don't think it was you that attacked Lola, and obviously you didn't attack me. But Robbie gets taken, and throughout the course of his trial proceeding, Bryony sticks to her story that it was Robbie that was at fault for attacking Lola. And she knows in her head that she doesn't really have any concrete evidence to go back on, but she, in her young mind, she feels she has to stick to this story and see it through, because she can't go back on her word and be like, oh, I actually don't know if it is Robbie, like, because no one's going to believe her, because then they believed her, to begin with. So it would, it's just, she knows in her head she's too far in to go back now, so she has to kind of stick with the story. So that's where part one ends, is Robbie goes to prison, and that's that. Then you get into part two, and Robbie basically tells readers that he had two choices. He could either stay in prison, or he could join the war efforts and go fight in France, in Dunkirk. And so he winds up joining the armed forces, and he fights in the war. And this part, it was interesting, but to me it was a little bit long, because part two was really, really long. Like, it could have probably been cut in half, and again, you would have gotten the gist of it. It was a lot of description of war and of Robbie fighting in the war alongside the two other, I guess, officers, you could call them, that were kind of like his group. But it basically talks about the war efforts and what it looked like fighting in the war, and the people that he met and the destruction that he witnessed, and the deaths that he witnessed. And then in part 2, and this is while Robbie is, when he got arrested, Robbie was probably like 19, 20. And then while he's in the war, he's probably like close to his mid-20s. I want to say like 23, 24 maybe. So he's not that much older. He's still pretty young. And so in part 2, you also see that Cecilia, after what happened that night with Bryony accusing Robbie and her whole family siding with Bryony and going against Robbie, even though they'd known him his whole life, you see that she became a nurse in a hospital, and she takes care of wounded soldiers from the war. And she has completely cut off any contact with anybody in her family. Her mom, dad, Leon, Bryony, her cousins, everybody. She's cut off contact to stay basically faithful to Robbie. And so that's pretty much part 2 in a nutshell, is just them two and how Cecilia and Robbie's life looks post wrongful accusation. And then in part 3, you go back to Bryony, and Bryony is now, I want to say about in her 20s, and she's also a nurse. She wanted to be a writer, and I believe she wanted to go to Cambridge where Cecilia went, but Bryony really struggled as she got older. She really struggled with the guilt she carried following the wrongful accusation of Robbie, because as she got older, she knew she was wrong, and she knew she wrongfully accused an innocent person and basically destroyed his life. And she had a hard time dealing with that guilt. And she basically went away from writing. She went away from going into those like fictional, fantasized worlds. And to basically make up for the guilt, she followed in Cecilia's footsteps and became a nurse at a hospital taking care of wounded soldiers. And part 3, at the end, gets a little interesting, because you see it and you're like, oh, okay, this might be good. So at the end of part 3, you see Bryony go and find Cecilia and Robbie, and they're living together. Robbie's out of the war. Cecilia still works at the hospital. They live together. And she basically goes to their house to try and make amends for what she did. She finally owns up to them for the fact that she did things wrong, that she destroyed his life wrongfully. She made wrongful accusations, all that. And she comes to their house after she found her cousin Lola. She secretly attended Lola's wedding, and Lola was getting married to Paul Marshall. It turns out that Paul Marshall was actually the one that assaulted her that night. And everyone came to know it, but everyone came to hide it. And the reason she was marrying Paul was to basically ensure her and Paul's safety and to bury the fact that Paul was the one that assaulted her and not Robbie. So she comes to Cecilia and Robbie's after attending Lola's wedding kind of secretly. She kind of dips in and out. And at the end of part 3, Robbie and Cecilia basically are like, you're going to write a note to our family, to us, to the police, to everyone in our family, and basically say like, you lied, you did something wrong, you destroyed our lives. It was your childish, fictional fantasies that made this wrongful accusation a solidified decision, and how it domino affected for everybody else. And she's like, okay, like I will do that. And during that, she writes a manuscript and she sent it to a publishing house, because while she's not a writer, she hasn't given up on that dream. And the manuscript she gives them is basically a less detailed version of what happened that day between Robbie and Cecilia at the well and the accusation that Bryony made. It's a less detailed version. And basically the publishing house writes back to her and it's like, great story, but we need more detail. We have so many questions, we have so many open holes. Like, you need to fill this in with more detail before we can consider it. And that's where part 3 ends. Then you get to London 1999, and Bryony is now in her 70s, and she's got severe dementia. And it follows her going to, I believe it's her 77th birthday, and she's back at the family house, which is now turned into a hotel. All of the cousins and the family obviously have aged, 40 years, 40 some odd years. I'm not good at quick math. And it basically shows her walking through her old house and reliving all of those memories. And her family is there celebrating her birthday. You see, I'm gonna say Piero, it's not right. His kids basically perform the play that Bryony had set for them to play for Leon when he came home in the summer in the 1930s. And it floods back all of these memories of kind of the guilt she holds for what she did to Cecilia and Robbie. But while you're reading this, you keep waiting for like old Cecilia and Robbie to be at the birthday party. And you're like, why are they not there? Why is she not talking about them? And you come to find out at the end that Robbie and Cecilia never actually got their happy ending. So the ending of part 3, when Robbie and Cecilia get a visit from Bryony, and they basically tell her like all the things that she needs to fix and to amend their relationship for the decision she made, that never actually happened. She explains how Robbie died of sepsis on the beaches of Dunkirk, and Cecilia died in the hospital after a bomb raid. And so they never got the happy ending that they should have gotten had Bryony not made that false accusation. And basically, this entire book is Bryony's atonement. She's trying to atone for the guilt and the despair that she caused because of her childish mind and imagination when she was 11, when she accused Robbie. So this book, specifically part 3, gives Robbie and Cecilia that happy ending that they deserved and that she knows they deserved had they been given the opportunity to. And so, yeah, you come to find out that Cecilia and Robbie actually died. They never got their ending. And this was Bryony's way of dealing with the burden of her guilt, was by writing this story, which was the manuscript she gave that publishing house. Writing this story was her atonement for combating and dealing with the grief that her wrongful accusation caused. That was really, I will say, that ending was awesome. Like, it didn't tell you that flat out in the end. You kind of had to do some reading between the lines, which is why I went online and I read a bunch of things and watched videos to like make sure I understood the ending and the fact that like, wait, this book is like Bryony telling the story. This book is Bryony depicting to you everything that happened from her being 11 up until her being 77. And I thought that was such a good ending because you're kind of waiting for like tragedy to strike, because yes, it struck when Robbie got taken away, but you were waiting for something to happen. And you kept thinking during part 2 that Robbie was about to die in the war, because like there were bombs everywhere. Like you thought he was going to die, and then he wound up not, and you're like, oh, cool, okay. But he actually did. And then part 3 is such a like a mind blur, because you find out like everything you just read wasn't true. It was Bryony's fictionalized version of giving them the ending she knows they deserved, but they didn't get because of her. It was her fault. I loved that ending. I thought that was awesome. I thought that was really well done. And had the beginning not been so slow, I probably most definitely would have given this a 5-star. I only gave it 3.5/4, but 3.5, because it was just really slow in the beginning and it was kind of hard to get through. But once you hit the middle of part 2 and on, beginning of part 3 and on, the book got really good. So I think this is a great book. It's definitely enticed me to want to read more classics. And I think I'm definitely going to. I highly recommend this. I know it's a movie. I haven't seen the movie. I'd love to see how well they portrayed the book in the movie and how closely they followed it. I would definitely give this a read. Definitely recommend it. I think was awesome. And sometimes the best books are the ones that are given to you, not the ones that you go and seek out that you know you'll enjoy. I had no idea if I would enjoy this, and I wound up really loving it. So that's the power of a good book. Thanks for joining for this episode. Make sure to keep up with me on Instagram and Goodreads. I always review my books on there.